tardes a todos, perdón. Buenas tardes a todos. Yo soy Gwen Philbrook del diario New York Times y es un gran placer darles la bienvenida a todos aquí en el Teatro Fernán Gómez y por todo el mundo a través de nuestra página web. Esta noche les presentamos la tercera de una serie de entrevistas en directo del programa Talks Madrid. Para el New York Times es un honor colaborar con la ciudad de Madrid en la organización de esta serie de eventos especiales en los que participan protagonistas del cine, del teatro, de la televisión y de la música. Durante el fin de semana les presentaremos 7 entrevistas en directo y 2 estrenos de películas nuevas recién exhibidas en festivales de cine. Times Talks es el programa de eventos en directo más destacado del New York Times,
which is the most important of New York Times. And here we have famous people who collaborate with our journalists. And now it is a great honor to introduce you my colleague from New York Times, Carol Olson-Day, who will talk to you in English about the guests tonight.
Thank you. Thanks. Hello, everyone. This evening's guest is well known throughout the world for his award-winning work, creating compelling characters on stage and screen, including Loki, Loki in Thor, The Avengers, and coming soon, Thor 2. On London's West End stage, he won the Laurence Olivier Award and the Theatregoers' Choice Award for both Othello and Ivanov, with Kenneth Branagh, with whom he also appeared on TV in Wallander. This summer, he played Prince Hal and Henry V in a special production of Shakespeare's Henry IV and Henry V on the BBC, opposite a who's who of British acting legends, including last night's Times Talks Madrid guest, Jeremy Irons. Here to interview him tonight is the theater reporter for the New York Times Global Edition, the International Herald Tribune. Based in London, he writes about the stage, the world of the stage, and all the people who make it come to life. He will be speaking with our moderator and with our guest, and I'd love to introduce them right now. So please join me in welcoming Matt Wolf of the New York Times and the International Herald Tribune, and our special guest, Tom Hiddleston.
Wow, amazing. Hello.
Wow, Tom.
It's a hell of a welcome.
Just another night in Madrid, huh? Wow.
That's one way to be welcomed, yeah.
I wonder if this audience knows that you have a prior history with this town in terms of having been on stage here. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, Madrid is one of my favorite cities in the world because when I when I started acting, one of my very first jobs was with a theatre company called Cheek by Jowl, and they're very well known in England, and they have long, for the last 25, 30 years, staged huge productions of old plays with usually very young companies of actors who are often at the beginning of their acting lives. And I joined the company in 2006 and did 2 productions, The Changeling by Thomas Middleton and Cymbeline by William Shakespeare. And we toured all the way around the world. We went to to New York and Moscow and Reykjavik and Paris and Luxembourg and Almagro. We played Almagro.
Wow.
But my favorite part was it was a 6-month gig, and you rehearse it for 6 weeks, and then, you know, off we go. And it was just a group of us in our mid-20s. And both tours, we start rehearsing it on the first Monday of January, and the last date of the gig would be Madrid in July at Teatro Español. And the Spanish, I have to say, the interesting thing about touring was that you'd encounter so many different responses to the play, which were national. I've got to say, the English audiences were the worst. They were, like after touring, you'd come back to London, they'd be like, "Oh, come on, a bit more enthusiasm." It was in Madrid. We had amazing responses. I
mean, you finished the tour
passion,
here?
You know.
It finished here.
Yeah, we'd finish here. Yeah.
Wow. So you must have had one hell of a closing party.
We did. Yeah. And it's, you know, it's midsummer and on Plaza Santa Ana, and it felt so civilized to start, you know, curtain up at 9 o'clock and curtain down at 11, and then you come outside, everyone's still eating, little cerveza, and you know, very, very civilized. Loved it.
One of the great things, Tom, of course, about writing about theater in London, as I do, is seeing these sort of beginnings of people's careers, and then their careers develop in all sorts of ways, as yours obviously has. But it seems like most British actors begin in the theater, pretty much most of the major ones. And then they do or don't go on to cinema. When you were in the theater early on, what did you think about a film career? Did it seem totally remote, or were you always eyeing it, or how did cinema seem?
Gosh, it's so hard to retroactively go back. I've always been a fan, a huge fan, a cinephile of every stripe, interested in movies and then in sort of cinema as an art form from being a child. And you know, my DVD collection is enormous. As a student at RADA, I used to run down to not just the National Theatre, but the BFI and watch, you know, reprints of Jacques Tati films, and I saw 2001 for the first time on the big screen at the National Film Theatre, and you know, so I was always certainly a cinema fan. But it seemed to me that I went to drama school really to train to be a theatre actor, because I knew that drama school really gave you tools for stagecraft that you needed, I thought. And it gave you a kind of physical rigor and a professionalism and a way of attacking different texts and characters and methodologies. And I wanted to sort of immerse myself in learning accents and stage fighting and to do everything from Shakespeare to Miller to Tennessee Williams and all these wonderful kind of the world of the theatre. And when I started in the theatre, it seemed very remote, this movie world. It seemed like you had to it was like being picked to play for Manchester United or Real Madrid, just impossible, you know, like, and it seemed very, you know, I would be in productions like the ones you saw at the Don Mar or whatever, and I'd audition for films and people would say, great audition, not this time, like, okay. And I started making a list. I wanted to sort of make a list of directors I'd met so I didn't forget them if I met them again. And I had to stop making the list because I would never book anything. And people would always call my agent and say, you know, Tom's terrific. He's like, we came to see him in the play. There was always this question of finance and funding in need of, you know, it just seemed like, I was like, well, forget it. It's never going to happen. And then I kind of, I suppose I kind of broke my own rules a bit. And I became fascinated by, I was very lucky in the theatre to work with some very established film names, I suppose. I worked with Ewan McGregor and Chiwetel Ejiofor in Othello. And then I'd done a television thing with Dame Judi Dench and obviously with Kenneth Branagh. And I found that their stories were quite interesting, and they kind of demystified the whole thing for me. They sort of said, oh, don't listen to what they tell you, you know, it's nonsense, you know. There was a received wisdom, certainly in my generation, that to go to America and try and start a film career was, you had to go off the back of some enormous homegrown success, like, I don't know, like Ewan in Trainspotting, for example. So then actually I was signed by an agent in Los Angeles who came to see Othello, and that never happens, you know. An LA agent comes to see Shakespeare and goes, ah, that kid, he looks good, okay. And I sort of took a punt and went over to LA and just went with an open mind and an open heart, and I got lucky, I guess.
Because what's fascinating is the way in which theater is threaded through your film work, as will be shown in the clips that we look at.
Yeah.
And so you've never entirely left theater behind, even though, of course, the film work has its own momentum.
Well, I feel like any actor's lifeblood is the theater, really, truly, because it reminds you of why you signed up. There's something very raw and very pure about standing in front of an audience live and performing a story from beginning to end every night, and you can't retake, and an editor can't snip out the best bits or the worst bits, and it's very pure, and there's an immediacy of connection with the audience that is amazing. And we live in a world now where everything electronic and technological is faster and easier, and you know, our media now is insanely quick. And I said to a friend of mine the other day, I said, there's basically an app for everything, but there's no app for acting. Like, it's still the same art that it was for the last 3,000 years, since people started standing up and singing songs and telling poems. You know, you still have to learn the lines and stand up and open yourself and be as truthful as you possibly can. So I think that's why theatre is so important and so a part of any actor's work, in a way.
And that segues really well to the first of several clips from Tom's work that we're going to look at, which is actually a fully realized adaptation for the cinema by the director Terence Davis of a classic English play from the 1950s called The Deep Blue Sea by Terence Rattigan. So let's look at the clip of Tom from The Deep Blue Sea, and then we will hear more about it.
Okay.
The Deep Blue Sea.
Here you go. It looks like bits of crockery.
It's cubist.
Ah.
It's like a brock.
Bric-a-brac. That was a joke.
I gathered.
We can't all be cultured.
Can't all be childish either.
Listen, it was childish people like me that saved people like you from invasion.
Why'd you have to bring that up? It's beside the point. No one is questioning your bravery, just your mind.
My mind? There's nothing wrong with my mind! Fubar!
What do you mean by that?
You're the clever one, you work it out.
What the hell do you mean by that?
Fubar. Acronym. Beyond all recognition.
Where are you going?
To the Impressionists!
Not edited out when you were filming, presumably.
Yeah.
What gallery was that?
That was a gallery in Greenwich, somewhere. Yeah. So it was obviously supposed to be the National Gallery.
So the audience may not know much about this film or the material, but it's one of the landmark British plays, particularly the post-war period. very English, very wounding, pretty grim, dealing with betrayal, potential suicide, and so on.
Yeah.
What did you feel about taking it on? Did you know the play?
I knew of it. I'd never seen it, and I'd read about it a lot, and I'd read about amazing productions of it. And it was, what was I doing? I think I was in the middle of shooting War Horse, Steven Spielberg's War Horse, and the script came to me, and I read it on a day where somebody else had to be on the horse, and I read it very quickly, and I found it was very short, the screenplay, because Terence Davis writes the shots in, so it moved at a hell of a pace, and I knew that Rachel Weisz was already attached to play Hester, and Simon Russell Beale was attached to play Collier, her husband. And I read this character, and the whole thing, it just was a very simple, refined, reduced sort of poem, like a hymn to different kinds of romantic love. And every character in the play is in need of love from another, but each of their ideas of love is different. And I thought it was so true and so tragic that Hester needs Freddie, and Collier needs Hester, and Freddie needs Hester, but they need each other in such different ways, and they're all coming from such different places because they each carry a particular kind of damage. And it was very beautiful, and I'd been an admirer of Terence for a long time. His Distant Voices Still Lives, I think, is among the greatest British films that I've ever seen. And he had a very particular, knowing that it was him and his taste, and he uses music very beautifully, and editing and the way he shoots things, and the combination of it was like, I must play this part. And I had to audition, and it was one of those auditions where I remember I learnt the entire film, just in case I had to do a scene that I hadn't prepared, and Terence and I ended up basically playing the entire film one morning, and then he asked me to do it, and it was thrilling. It was an amazing, amazing job, and Rachel is brilliant and beautiful and brave.
The material, of course, is very richly and robustly English, isn't
Yeah.
it? And one of the things, we were talking about this a little bit last night with Jeremy Irons, one of the things that sometimes comes up with English actors is, to what extent do they want to embrace the Englishness, Britishness of the work, of themselves?
Yeah.
And to what extent do they want to leave that behind? Of course, in Woody Allen's film Midnight in Paris, you play F. Scott Fitzgerald, which is pretty good at leaving Englishness behind. But with this, did you think, yeah, this is part of my heritage?
Yes, I think so. And I think I had just finished a run of, I just played, that year I'd played Loki and Thor already, and I'd already shot Midnight in Paris, and it was going to be a very quick shoot. We shot it in 23 days or something, and it was a small production, and I just thought, this is something I would love to do, and it was something to do with my understanding of a particular time in British history which is not often focused on. And I felt that Freddie Page was an emblem of the kind of soldier who survived the Second World War. So he was he was a bomber pilot, and he came back very distinguished with lots of medals and military rewards. But he's so damaged, and he's expected by society in the early 50s to readjust, to retrain as an accountant or a solicitor, and sort of be okay with it. And this is in the days before therapy was being talked about, and as Terence put one day, you can't put a whole country into therapy. And Freddie's sort of alive with, he's just desperate to live, he's desperate to drive 95 miles an hour down the Great West Road, to drink in the pub and sing, and he's just got this kind of vitality that's deeply destructive, but also electric, that she's attracted to. And I thought, in terms of deconstructing Britishness, that was quite a fascinating place to go to.
And also in terms of juggling scale, as you say. I mean, you'd already shot Thor, and then you did this.
Yeah.
So to go from something huge and epic and clearly a blockbuster to an intimate chamber piece, which
well,
is
it was
what
about
this
love.
is.
That was the thing. Actually, that was the thing. It was a film about love, and I'd done a lot of fighting that year. And I just was playing a cavalry officer charging into the front line, and Loki does a lot of fighting in his own way, and it was so nice to just to try and get inside what happens between a man and a woman in an intimate space, and it didn't matter to me that it was period, and actually Terence and Rachel weren't interested in making a period piece. I think if you make a period piece, there's no point in kind of emptily honoring the period if it doesn't speak to your time. And ultimately it's just a film about two people who can't love each other in the right way.
And interestingly, of course, Loki does have a theatrical thread because Thor was directed by somebody with whom you'd appeared on screen many times and actually on stage, Kenneth Branagh. And your wonderful performance in Chekhov's Ivanov on the West End. When you were doing that play with Ken, was he sort of taking you backstage going, actually, I've got this little blockbuster bubbling up, which I'd quite like you to do when you finish this Chekhov stuff?
Truly. It was funny because my history with Ken is so random. We both kind of acknowledge how random it is. He saw me in Othello, at the Donmar Warehouse, and he then asked me to do a radio play with him of Cyrano de Bergerac, and we did it for 3 days for BBC Radio 3, and then Michael Grandage and Tom Stoppard, who'd written the adaptation of Ivanov, asked me to be in Ivanov, so it sort of had nothing to do with Ken, but then he also had asked me to be in Wallander, which is this adaptation of Swedish detective thrillers, so suddenly we were both staring down the barrel of an entire year together. But it was fantastic, and it was during Ivanov that it was announced that he was directing Thor. And I kid you not, I was dressed, I had a goatee, and I was playing a very priggish, self-righteous Russian doctor, as Chekhov beautifully often writes. And he was so full of ideological fire and brimstone, and was wearing, braces and a waistcoat, and I looked so far from superheroic, as you could imagine, and a little pocket watch, and wire-rimmed spectacles, and my little sort of book, and the notes I would take, and when it was announced that he was directing the film, in the interval, I ran up to his dressing room with an enormous, empty water cooler, pretending it was the hammer of Thor in costume, and
you got the job right then.
And because it was so, in my own mind, it was so outrageously unavailable. It was just not gonna. There was no way I was going to be considered. And then it so happened that I was talking to my LA agent who'd seen me in Othello after that, and I was in Los Angeles, kind of noodling around, just sort of seeing what was there, and he was there too, and so he asked me to come and audition for the role of Thor, because at that time, I mean, it's sort of an amazing character in a way, because it's like, on one level, Chris Hemsworth, who ended up getting it, and who is monumental in the role, I have to say, and he's a dear friend, and so there's absolutely no bad blood between us at all. He requires such physical stature, but also it requires a great actor who can go from arrogance to vulnerability to, but who can also sell the action of a big blockbuster, and so they really didn't know what they wanted, so they were looking at everybody, and I was over 6 foot and blonde, so I passed muster there, and I auditioned, and then eventually sort of got down to the wire, and the producers sort of said, this guy's kind of, it's all right, like, we should put him in the film somewhere, and I should say publicly, and I'm pleased to be able to say it, that I owe Kenneth Branagh an enormous debt of gratitude. I owe him so much, because Because the business is so often, or that side of it, the big movie business, not the art, not the people, sort of the creative people, but the people with the dollars. They're so scared of investing in something that's not going to work, and Ken was able to say to producers on a film that cost a lot of money, Tom will, he's got it, don't worry. And to do that, it's just an amazing thing to do for a young actor. Like, everyone needs a break. And like I've said, there were many, many, many people. There's a long list of people who didn't give it to me. And I was starting to think that it was kind of never going to happen.
It's funny because he's almost been sort of this guiding light throughout your career in an odd way.
He would probably be so ashamed to hear you say that. But he has been, and he's been very, very inspiring. Not just because the thing is, he's never given me advice. He's never taught me how to do anything, but he's always, just by virtue of how he works, I found very, very inspiring. His extraordinary diligence and care and industriousness and professionalism, and I've never seen him literally not run at the day. The amount of, he's got such energy, and he never takes anything for granted, and it's never over. He just reads everything, and he's kind of a very, very searching, curious intellect.
Well, you talked about the physical transformation that you effected in order to be in Ivanov, and of course you had a completely different physical transformation to do the Thor sequence, and you're currently shooting the third one in the series.
Yeah.
But before we talk further about that, let's look at the next clip, which is from The Avengers.
Oh my goodness. Okay. The Chitauri are coming. Nothing will change that. What have I to fear?
The Avengers. That's what we call ourselves. Sort of like a team. Earth's mightiest heroes type thing.
Yes. I've met them.
Yeah. Takes us a while to get any traction, I'll give you that one. But let's do a head count here. Your brother, the demigod. A super soldier, a living legend who kind of lives up to the legend. A man with breathtaking anger management issues, a couple of master assassins, and you, big fella. You've managed to piss off every single one of them.
That was the plan.
Not a great plan. When they come, and they will, they'll come for you.
I have an army.
We have a Hulk.
Oh, I thought the Beast had wandered off.
You're missing the point. There's no throne. There is no version of this where you come out on top. Maybe your army comes, and maybe it's too much for us, but it's all on you. Because if we can't protect the Earth, you can be damn well sure we'll avenge it.
So, Tom, where do we begin? The hair, the boots, the garb, the voice?
Oh, my goodness.
What is it like when you look at that? What do you think?
It's funny having sort of talked so high-mindedly about industriousness and diligence, and really it's just wearing silly costumes, isn't it? I'm so proud to be in that film, because there's part of me, and I think there's a part of any actor, that's basically still a 5-year-old child. And I grew up watching things like Christopher Reeve in Superman, and Harrison Ford in Indiana Jones, and superheroes. It's the biggest. It's a toy box, and I love playing that character because he's actually really complex for a superhero, for a supervillain, and part of the appeal is to do with the physical transformation. Because I've never wanted to be, and it kind of threads into what we were saying about Britishness, I've never wanted to be boxed in by a type of character that I always play. I find I just wouldn't find it very interesting, and I don't think anyone else would. And part of the reason I'm an actor is I'm interested in different shades of the truth in different parts of life. And how quite often we're like the human race is bound together by a certain unity in things, and that acting in whatever you're in is about excavating the things that make us all the same: birth, death, love, grief, loss, loneliness, gratitude, generosity, humor, solitude, and all of those things exist in every story, in any time, in any place. And so the joy for me, the joy for me of playing different people from different times in different costumes with different hair color and different shades is that whether it's the Deep Blue Sea or Ivanov or the Avengers, you're still kind of digging around in humanity. And the fun stuff is that, in Avengers, you get to fly through the air and be beaten almost to a pulp by the Incredible Hulk, which not many actors have done.
Yeah. Doesn't happen in Chekhov.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't happen in Chekhov. And I loved it. I loved the fact that I loved that you're taking this picture. I mean, here I am. I've got blonde hair. I was born in London, and I was never in my wildest dreams thought that I would be playing the Norse god of mischief, come down to tyrannize the human race and take over the planet, because I've got some, daddy issues, and some brother issues, and I want my throne, but also in a film like that, which is so beautifully tied together. Actually, it's actually very tightly written, and it's very entertaining and very funny. And I got to work with people like Robert Downey Jr. and Samuel L. Jackson, and it's a great cast of people. And so
tell us about the look. I mean, what do you shape it? Do you say I want my hair to be longer, shorter, more, breastplate, boots? How do you get to the look?
Well, I'm starting to. Well, I had a long time initially before the first Thor film. I simply started with, the great thing about the character is he's actually ancient. He is part of Norse mythology, which goes back as far, if not further, than the Greco-Roman mythology. And Loke turns up in Scandinavian myths everywhere. He was like Dionysus or Bacchus. He was the spirit who people were afraid of. He was the monster that parents told their children about at night. No, you don't have to feel sorry for him. But it's fascinating. You read the Norse myths and you realize that there's actually a huge amount of material there. And then what Stan Lee and Jack Kirby did when they started drawing the Marvel comics in the 60s is when they invented Thor and Loki and Odin, they were borrowing and very honestly kind of sort of stealing from this pantheon of Norse gods. And then so I read all the comics, and it starts off being much sillier than even I did it. But in the first runs of the comics, Loki comes down and he turns a whole street of cars in New York into ice cream because he thinks it's funny.
It is.
It kind of is. And he changes it. He looks very much like a comic book character. And so there was a thing of trying to be true to the look of the comic book, because that's what we're doing, is we're making a film of a comic, but also trying to make it palatable to a regular film-going audience who just like movies, but making it a real story genuinely about a father and two sons, and something that people could connect to. And so Ken and I talked about the Shakespearean references of fathers and sons and brothers, and it's shot through with all that stuff. And then in terms of creating the look, we just talked about it and said, how do we make something that's both regal and kind of athletic and sort of majestic, and also dark, but also practical, because you have to get through the day and fight in it, so it has to move. So it's a very complicated sort of scenario. And then, as the Americans have this word, which I think is kind of untranslatable, which is badass. And
he's a badass.
He's a badass,
Yeah,
and so sometimes the Marvel producers are great because they go, Tom, we want you to look like, we want you to be able to move, and we want you to be able to we basically want you to look awesome and badass. And you go, okay, and then you sort of experiment, but it's fun because I think he just looks he's gothic and pale and damaged, and it's almost like a mask. It's like any character, you need a mask through which to project that particular truth. Loki's truth is one of insanity and deranged evil, and he's hurt and lost and lonely, but dyeing my hair black and sort of painting my face in a way, it gives me so much so that after 2 hours of sitting in makeup and going through costume, you look in the mirror and you're a completely different shape. And it's kind of interesting, mask work, anyway.
And you're back in this world, of course, again, for the next installment.
Yeah.
Do you want to whet the audience's appetite with just a little bit of where the journey takes us now?
I want to tell you, but I would have to
You'd have to be shot.
Yeah. I would have to kill you all, which I'm sure Loki would love to do, but I don't want to do that. No, I just can't. I can't say anything. My hands are tied. There are probably snipers hired by Marvel Film Studios in the back of the room.
What's wonderful, though, is that you were talking about fathers and sons and the Shakespearean affinity that this triptych, for lack of a better word, may contain. And that segues very neatly to another project which has echoes of Kenneth Branagh, and it also has echoes of Last Night, in that we met your father, Jeremy,
so I heard, yeah.
and in Henry IV, 1 and 2, and then, of course, you carry it forward in Henry V. So before we talk about this further, let's look at a clip of Tom in the title role of Shakespeare's Henry V.
Once more, I come to know of thee, King Harry, if for thy ransom thou wilt now compound, before thy most assured overthrow.
Who hath sent thee now?
The Constable of France.
I pray thee bear my former answer back. Bid them achieve me and then sell my bones. Good God! Why should they mock poor fellows thus? And many of our bodies shall no doubt find native graves, upon the which, I trust, shall witness living brass of this day's work. Let me speak proudly. Tell the constable we are but warriors for the working day. Our gayness and our guilt are all besmirched with rainy marching in the painful field. But by the mass our hearts are in the trim. And my poor soldiers tell me yet ere night they'll be in fresher robes, or they will pluck the gay new coats or the French soldiers' heads and turn them out of service. Herald, save thou thy labour. Come thou no more for ransom. Thou shalt have none, I swear, but these my joints, which if thou wilt have as I will leave you them, shall yield thee little. Tell the constable.
I shall, King Harry. Thou never shalt hear herald anymore.
So here you are playing a role that when you were 7, if I've done my maths correctly, when you were 7, Kenneth Branagh did on screen, getting Oscar nominations for Best Actor and Best Director. Did you, when you got this assignment for the BBC, call him up and go, what do I do?
Do you know, I didn't, actually. And he emailed me first, because I was in the middle of shooting The Avengers, and I was in New Mexico, and he said he'd heard about it, and I said immediately, like, obviously, it's not even come close to yours. And he said, look, don't, just have a great time, enjoy it. And we then talked about, I saw him or something in London, and he was just so excited that it was happening. Because first and foremost, he's a fan. He loves Shakespeare so much, and the more there is, the better, as far as he's concerned. And And he loved that they were doing the sort of 4 of them in sequence, Richard II, Henry IV, Part 1, Part 2, and Henry V. And I don't know, I can't think if an actor has been as lucky as I have been in a way and done all 3 on film. People have done it on stage, and people have played Hal and the Henry V, but it was to do the whole journey was amazing. And actually, I received an email from him over the summer, and he said he'd watched it, and he just thought it was amazing, and he was so proud and very sweetly very proud of what I'd done, but more proud of what everybody had done, what Richard Eyre had done, and Thea Sharrock, and absolutely, he was raving about Jeremy Irons. Just said, it was amazing to see Henry IV at the center of that play again, or both plays, and just thought it was fantastic that it was happening, and one hopes that it gives the BBC confidence to commission more, and because it was something that Shakespeare is, as a British citizen, is our greatest artistic inheritance in a way, and we should do more, but that he should be on television more. So I was so lucky to get to do them.
The amazing thing, of course, as you know, about any Shakespeare in Britain is that they come in battalions. Yeah. And the week that your Henry V was shown on the BBC in the UK, I actually saw 2 stage productions of it the same week, one at Shakespeare's Globe and then the propeller version at a theatre in North London called the Hampstead. My question is, what is that like for an actor taking on these iconic parts when you know that the comparisons are ubiquitous?
Well, I knew if I was going to play Henry V, and having worked so much with Kenneth Branagh, I was like, well, it's going to happen. And I just sort of let that go immediately. And the first emotion, because actually they happened quite far apart. Richard Eyre, bizarrely, I met in Singapore airport at 2:00 in the morning. He was on his way to open Mary Poppins in Sydney, and I was on my way to Sydney to go to the world premiere of Thor, and we'd been trying to meet in London the week before, and we hadn't managed it, and we were getting off the plane to change planes, and I said hello, and he said, Tom, what are you doing here? And then we talked about Prince Hal, and then I remember him asking me to do it on the day of the royal wedding. Bizarrely, I was watching the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge process up the aisle, and it was very sort of majestic and a scene of pageantry. And I thought it was kind of interesting that he'd asked me to do it that day. But then the Henry V idea didn't come until later when the producers, Pippa Harris and Sam Mendes, were thinking, well, wouldn't it be interesting to ask Tom to do it, because then you can do all of them.
Oh, so it wasn't to be a package initially?
No, initially. And so then I had to fly back and meet Thea, because I'd never met her before, even though I'd been a huge fan of her work. And we did we sort of read a bit, and then she asked me to do it. And then the first feeling is it's a mixture of intense excitement and fear, because it feels like a huge mountain you have to climb. But then it becomes, once you start working on it and learning it, it becomes the greatest privilege that you get to inhabit these words that have existed for 500 years, or 400 or whatever it is between. And the wisdom and compassion and eloquence in the writing is something that is the greatest gift of any actor, because it's not just like reading it. You have to absorb the words and the feelings behind the words, and then perform the action in between them. And so it's literally, I think it's sort of like, when you go to a country you've never visited, and it kind of changes you. Let's say you'd never been to Spain before, and you came to Spain, and you'd be like, I've been to Spain, and I think it's a wonderful place, and now I've seen the world in a different way. I kind of feel with the best characters, it's a little bit like that. Is you play a character, and it sort of changes you, because you've had the experience of living inside that spirit. And of course, it's all Shakespeare. It's all his own brain.
Well, what's interesting, and I want to open it up to questions after this, so please be thinking of questions for Tom to begin after this. Often when you see Henry V on stage, it's an exercise in heroism and rabble-rousing, and it's full of fire and brimstone and brio. What I thought was really lovely about Thea's version and your performance in it, and maybe this is what the cinema allows, is that it was interior, more contemplative, very self-questioning. You seemed as if you had a profound relationship with God, which sometimes on stage doesn't register.
Yeah.
And I just wonder if you could talk about that in the way in which maybe doing it for camera shaped your portrayal.
Well, somebody said to me, the thing about film is actually the best film acting is when you're not doing anything. And actors or anyone in stillness is kind of captivating. And if you watch any Bergman film, you sort of that's the first thing that jumps out at you is how still everything is. And so I knew that there was an opportunity for an intimacy in a way that there's something. Someone said to me that that the camera can see what you're thinking. And Terence Davis said on The Deep Blue Sea, he said, the camera captures truth, but it also captures falsity. So if you don't feel it, don't do it. And it's sort of ruthless in that way. And theatrical technique, where you're is sometimes more of a presentational medium, and that's never going to help you in front of a camera. So I thought, Shakespeare is so theatrical in itself, so wordy, it's so dense, and it was a challenge to try and make it small, but also feel big. And the God question is interesting because I just kept reading the play and I kept seeing how many times he prays to God, he appeals to God, and Henry IV does the same. And there's so many references to God. And we tend to forget because we live in a different world. But this is a society who believed in the divine right of kings, that you inherited the throne and that you inherited it by divine right. And so when he says, "O God of battles, steel my soldiers' hearts," he's appealing to God. And at the end of the Battle of Agincourt, he says to his army, he says, "Be it death proclaimed through my host to boast of this victory, or take the praise from God, which is his only." And it happens again all the time in Henry IV, is this constant praying. People pray. The night before the battle, he says, "O God, think not upon the fault my father made in compassing the crown." So there's a piety there that I thought was fascinating. He's almost inhabiting a chivalric code that he believes that he waged this war with France, with the throne of France, because the Archbishop of Canterbury, who has, a hotline, the red phone to God, had told him that it was okay. And the other thing I should say, I suppose, is Thea and I kept thinking about leadership. And we're both of a generation that have grown up with political and military leaders who tend to reveal themselves after a time to not be trustworthy. We didn't, and so there's this thing about rhetoric, as in people standing up above everybody else and making big speeches. And Thea and I, we talked so much about seeing British politicians at party political conferences, standing up and making big speeches, promising things and saying, "Follow me," and then everybody follows them, and then, 2 years or 3 years or 4 years later, they break all their promises and everyone's let down. So I thought Henry V was this extraordinary leader because he was actually there. He was the King of England, but he was also captain of his ruined band, as in he was leading the charge. He was at the front line of his army. And we don't have that anymore.
Exist.
The people who say, "Let's go to war," aren't the people driving the tanks. And Henry did, and I thought that was amazing. And we had this shorthand, which was get off the horse. As in, any leader who really believes in his power as a leader doesn't need to be up above everybody else. And so some of the, I suppose, the smaller, I made quite rebellious decisions to try and make the big speeches smaller, because I thought if I was a soldier and I was staring my death in the face, what I would want from the person who told me to be there was somebody on the ground at my side saying, I am as scared as you are and I'm coming with you. Let's go. I didn't want to be like listening to big words from someone way over there on a horse or on a podium. I thought what would move me was someone literally moving, like being grounded, being a part of his army. And so that was our sort of big decision in a way.
Well, that's a beautiful answer, and it really feels a beautiful performance. So,
thank you very much.
Let's have some beautiful questions. Oh my God, we're going to be here till midnight. That person just there in the front. Yes, you.
Hi.
Yeah, you. Yes, you.
First of all, thank you for coming here tonight.
Thank you.
And second of all, I have to say this, you're my favorite actor, and I think you are the best actor of your generation.
Thank you
and
very much.
The Oscars are coming, don't worry.
What? Okay.
You're going to win a bunch of those. So I just wanted to say that I did a drawing of you because you are like my second idol, and I just wanted to give it to you. So
thank you.
Please.
Thank
and
you.
Thank you very much. You can check out the other drawings if you want to. I have also Iron Man here. Check them out if you want.
Oh, they're incredible. Wow.
And there's also another girl here.
That's pretty cool.
Who has another drawing.
There you go.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you. Thank you.
Does anyone have a question, or are you all bringing gifts for Tom? Is there a question? Yes, just there. Yes, you.
Good afternoon. My name is Eva.
Hello.
And I would like to know if in the near future you are preparing some project in the line of the Deep Blue Sea.
Of the Deep Blue Sea?
Yeah.
What, more things like that?
Yes, in this kind of movie, because it's the movies I like to watch you on the screen.
Thank you.
So more intimate movies coming up, Tom?
I just spent the summer making a film with a director called Jim Jarmusch, who you may know. And the film is called Only Lovers Left Alive. And it's a very small film, and there's only sort of 5 characters in it, but it's really about 2 people, a man and a woman. And I play the man, and
hey!
And Tilda Swinton plays the woman. So, and it's kind of about, again, it's about love, really. It's about commitment and, yeah, just the tenderness and complexity of that engagement. You know, what happens in the space between a man and a woman. It was beautiful. It was lovely to work with both of them. They're amazing, amazing artists.
Saying it was a surprise. Okay, good.
Thank you.
Is that a present there? Yes. Can we keep the presents for later, just so that we get through the questions? Because otherwise it's going to be like Christmas.
Yeah, amazing.
How about right there? Yes.
One second.
Yes, go ahead. Yeah. Yes, there. In Spanish. Okay. We need headphones.
Headphones.
Sorry.
I would like to ask you how you, in the tavern in the scene with Henry IV, when you play Jeremy Irons, how did you prepare this scene?
¿Cómo? No he entendido. En la taberna. Cuando está en la taberna.
In the tavern, when you imitate your father, how did you prepare this imitation?
Well, that's one of the great scenes in the play, because it's just a beautiful conceit that the scene before Prince Hal goes to see his father and is roundly chastised for misbehaving, that Falstaff suggests that before he goes he should have a dress rehearsal. And Falstaff plays the king, giving Hal a reprimand, and then Hal has the idea to be his father and Falstaff be Hal. And Jeremy actually was very, very kind in recording himself saying the speech that I had to say so that I could do an impression of him. Basically.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
That's great.
So very early on I got a kind of MP3 of Jeremy's amazing voice, simply reading what I had to say, and then I made a terrible kind of hopelessly pantomimic impression of it. But I hope he's not too offended by it.
Was there a question just behind? Somewhere there. Yes, that woman there. Yeah. Yes? Yes, you.
Hi.
Sorry, I'm totally nervous.
Oh, don't be. It's all good.
When you're on stage in a theater, you see the success immediately. But when you're making a movie, it comes later. And in a theater, it's only the audience you can see. But in a movie, it could be worldwide. So how is it if you see the success you have later and so much?
It's a really good question. It's kind of strange, actually, because it feels like, sometimes it feels like, I said this to my mum recently, that you make a film and then you finish it, and while you're making it, especially with the Marvel films, it's all so secret that I get so excited about it while I'm making it, and then it finishes and it takes 8 or 9 or 10 or months to come out, and by the time it comes out and everyone else is excited about it, you're in the middle of something else usually. And this is what I said to my mum. It's like somebody in September saying, "How was your Christmas?" And you go, it was, I guess it was okay. I mean, it was Christmas. It was ages ago. Whereas the beauty of being in a theatre is you're all doing Christmas at the same time. But it's amazing though, and it's wonderful because you also, conversely, you have some perspective on it in film. You've stopped playing the character, it's over, it's finished, you've washed it away. And then when you come, if you can bear it to watch the film, you can go, wow, that's what we did, at Christmas time, whatever it is.
This audience is not going to like to know, Tom, that we only have time for one more question.
Oh, no. Sorry about that.
So maybe somebody right at the back. Yes, that right at the back, you, yes.
Hang on a second.
Microphone. No, Mike.
Sorry. Tom, you're an actor. You have done several plays. What is the most important thing to you of being an actor? What advice would you give to someone who wants to be an actor?
My goodness. Gosh, what I say? so many things. I could go on forever. I would say I would probably reduce it to something like this. And I will quote Shakespeare because he's wiser than me. And I've said it before probably, but I believe that actors are in the business of truth and holding the mirror up to nature. So it's our job to represent humanity in all of its virtue and fallibility and frailty and honesty and complexity and contradiction. I mean, human beings are so strange because they are so contradictory. I've been reading this book about identity recently, and I think that's just, it's something I find interesting, but that it gets inside what the meaning of identity is, and if there is a you-ness of you and a me-ness of me and a Matt-ness of Matt, like what is that? And it talks about kind of the way the brain works and the possibility of souls and the fact that the brain has a muscle for constructing autobiography to give us a sense of unity of character, that I am Tom sitting before you now. Whereas in fact, I probably am lots of different people in this strange collection of molecules that's been around for 31 years. And the interesting thing about acting is that you are using all your experience and all of your emotion and all of your thoughts and feelings to represent that, the human beings, and the different colors of being alive. And so I suppose my simple advice is love your life. And I only say that because your life is what you have to give. And sometimes if you have a good day or a bad day, that day might be the thing that you need to call upon when you're playing a particular part. You know, there's no point in me saying this is a film about love if I haven't ever been in love before, or playing a son to a father if I don't have a father myself. And sometimes, as an actor, you're asked to do things you've never done. You know, and that's when you have to extend your imagination and your compassion towards a situation and say, what would it be like if I was in that? If I was in, you know, with Loki, what would it be like if I had been adopted and lied to and betrayed, and but I also had some kind of strange magical power, you know. And you know, but children do it readily. You know, children play that game all the time. So I'll finish with the Shakespeare, which is sort of, you know, after love your life, to thine own self be true, and it must follow as night the day. Thou canst not then be false to any man.
Tom spoke about Shakespeare being much wiser than he, but I think we'll all agree that An Hour with Tom has a lot of wit and wisdom and delight. So thank you so much for being with us, and thank you all for coming.